Hiya, welcome back to the sunny south of France. It's about -75 here today. Do you know, it's been the coldest April since 1732. Actually, it's been the coldest April for 18 years, but it's still bloody cold. Anyway, welcome back to Villefranche. You see that marketplace down there? It's been like that since October the 29th, when everything shut, the bars and the restaurants. But do you know what? You're not going to believe this. I've got some good news for you. Because just possibly, just perhaps possibly, things are going to change. It's just possible that Villefranche is about to come back to life. Isn't it Halloween? Now, before we get going talking about COVID, I want to talk to you about bitches. I don't mean bitches like Halloween. You're not a bitch, really, Halloween. I mean a place called Bitch. Because, you know, there's a French town called Bitch, and this week Facebook banned it because they decided that bitch was like a bit of a rude word on the internet. But, you know, I discovered that it's not just bitch that's in trouble, because there's a French town called Eze. They could be in trouble. Gives a whole new meaning to the sense of, you know, when people say, I live in the arse end of the world. Well, that's what people in Eze must feel like. But there's not just a town called Eze. I also discovered there's a town called Piss and Crap on. Some people have no luck. Anyway, I just thought I'd toss that in as a bit of a segue. But now we're going to get back to the main event, which is France and re-overture and whether you can come on your jollies this year. So what's going on? Are things really going to open up here? Well, the government's giving heavy hint that they are. In fact, the Prime Minister this week said schools, infant schools, creches, my favourites, they're going to open by, I think, April the 26th. Then on May the 3rd, I think middle school and possibly colleges are going to reopen. And then the idea is that by May the 15th, they are giving heavy hint that terraces, i.e. outdoor bits of restaurants and bars, that they're going to be allowed to reopen. So there is every chance that what they promised, or what Mr. Macron promised when he sort of semi-locked us down about a month ago, is going to come to pass. And it's interesting, because what does that mean in terms of your chance of coming here and holidays and all that stuff that you're interested in? Well, technically in Britain you can travel from May the 17th, can't you? And it does look like there will not be any restrictions on you coming into France after about May the 15th. Now, you'll still need the old PCR test 3 days before you come, but there certainly is no indication there'll be any quarantine at this end. I guess the question is, will there be quarantine going back to Britain? Well, been looking on the old Twitter, and that Paul Charles guy, who I'm a big fan of, he's a sort of travel industry expert. He's always an expert. Have you noticed? Expert in everything. I'm a Villefranche expert. And Halloween, what are you an expert in, Halloween? Shaking. It's because she's so cold. But he said this week that he thinks most of Europe under the traffic light system will actually be either green or amber. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means green or amber means you can come, you can go back, you don't have to stay in one of those Lenny Henry hotels at Gatwick for 1,700 quid for 10 days. You can just do a PCR test and then release well, you have to do 2 PCR tests, one when you get back, and then you can do another one, I think, after 5 days to release. Those PCR tests, by the way, they're too expensive, Mr. Johnson. 120 quid, what a con. Apparently Randox, you know, they sponsored the Grand National last week. Did you notice that? Randox say they're going to do theirs for 60 quid. I still think that's quite steep, 60 quid and then 60 quid, so that's 2 tests. But anyway, it does mean that if, and it is an if, France is a green zone, or if it's an amber under the traffic light system, you'll be able to come here, you'll be able to go back, you'll be able to quarantine for 5 days in your own home, and then you can go out to play. So I guess the question for people is it worth the risk? Is there a likelihood that France suddenly is given a sort of red light, is put as a red zone, and then you end up stuck in an airport hotel at vast expense? Well, the figures here are such that there has to be a little risk, because there are still 30,000 people in hospital. There are 5,500 people in reanimation. I like that phrase, reanimation. It sounds better than intensive care, doesn't it? But it means the same thing. But there are signs that those figures have plateaued. Now, obviously, as things open up, they may go up again. The death rate here is about 300 a day. It's not great, but it's still not. It's nothing like the sort of 900, 1,000 that I think we had at the peak of the second wave. Brazilian variant, you'll have heard a lot about the Brazilian variant. Well, it is making up an increasing number of the cases here, but then it is in Britain already. Is Britain going to exclude people because of the Brazilian variant, or is it going to make France a red zone because of the Brazilian variant? It remains to be seen, who knows. But there are definite signs that life is perhaps, just perhaps, about to get going again here. It'll be very interesting to see whether they manage to stick to the 15th of May deadline and whether the terraces do reopen. The plan is for the restaurants themselves to get going again in June. Interestingly, I noticed Monaco announced this week that their restaurants are planned to reopen by June the 2nd. If you want my guess, I have a feeling France will be more or less the same date. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if after all this, the dates of reouverture don't more or less correspond to the ones that you've got in the UK. I think the UK will maybe be 2 or 3 weeks ahead. As to the vaccination programme, which they also say is going to impact on the old traffic light system, the vaccination programme has really got going in France now. Obviously, it's much more inferior to that great British post-Brexit system that's going on in the UK, and you know, to be fair, of course, the vaccination numbers are much lower here, but they're vaccinating well over 500,000 people a day now, and there's quite a lot of optimism that they'll get to 20 million by mid-May and that they'll get to 30 million by June. So that's the news. It's quite positive. I'm feeling quite positive despite the fact that I'm really, really cold and that only the hot water bottle of Halloween is keeping me warm. But there are definite signs of life, and there is a sense of some light at the end of the tunnel. I'm hoping over the next few weeks to do even more positive vlogs like this. In fact, I'm hoping to actually go and visit some restaurants and some bars who are preparing to reopen. Maybe if you've got a restaurant or a bar and you'd like me to come and film and watch your progress towards reouverture, then drop me a message in the comments below. If you don't think that what I've said is true, drop me a message in the comments below. Some of you might think I'm being overly optimistic. Some people might think that France is absolutely crazy to be trying to reopen when they've 30,000 people in hospital. But Mr. Macron is facing re-election in under a year's time, and he's been determined to try and keep the economy going throughout this, which is why this third lockdown has not really been a full lockdown. Anyway, that's all from Villefranche. It's all really positive, isn't it, Halloween? Is it positive? Are you feeling positive? Do we think the world's going to reopen? Do we think we're going to get our summer holidays this year? Yes, I do. Bye.
Bye.